The grand piano stood in the center of the glass atrium like a challenge. It had been placed there as decoration for the company's annual celebration, polished to a mirror shine beneath the white lights. Executives in tailored suits circled it with champagne glasses in hand, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. A string quartet had been scheduled, but a last-minute cancellation left the instrument untouched, silent, almost embarrassed by its own presence. Clara Weiss, CEO of one of Berlin's fastest-growing tech firms, stood beside the piano in a silver gown that shimmered each time she moved. She was brilliant, decisive, respected. She was also, in moments she never admitted, painfully lonely. She tapped her glass with a spoon. "Since our musicians have abandoned us," she announced with a charming smile. "Perhaps someone here can play." There were chuckles. A few men shook their heads. Someone muttered that they only played golf. Clara let her fingers glide over the piano lid. "I have a weakness for Chopin," she added lightly. "Tell you what, if anyone here can sit down and play Chopin beautifully, I might just marry them." The room erupted in laughter. It was clearly a joke, a theatrical flourish. Clara herself laughed, tilting her head back slightly. Near the back of the atrium, holding a mop he had meant to return to the storage closet, stood Marek Nowak. Most people didn't know his name. They knew him as the janitor, the quiet man who arrived before sunrise and left, long after the office lights went out. He emptied trash bins, wiped fingerprints from glass, repaired broken hinges. He moved like a shadow through corridors of ambition. Marek had once stood on stages far larger than this one. His hands tightened around the mop handle. "You should try," whispered Lena from accounting, who happened to be standing beside him. She was half teasing. "What's the worst that could happen?" He shook his head. "It's not for me." But Clara's voice echoed in his mind. "If anyone here can play Chopin beautifully." He thought of Warsaw, of a small apartment, with peeling wallpaper and a mother who believed music could save a soul. He thought of the conservatory, of competitions, of applause that felt like sunlight. He thought of the accident 10 years ago, the icy road, the hospital room, the doctor explaining that while his hands would heal, his confidence might not. He had not touched a grand piano since. The laughter near the piano began to fade. No one stepped forward. Clara raised an eyebrow. "No secret pianists among my brilliant team?" The silence stretched. Before he could reconsider, Marek leaned the mop against the wall and walked forward. At first, no one noticed. Conversations continued in soft waves. Then someone snorted quietly. "Is he serious?" Clara turned. Her expression flickered with confusion before settling into polite amusement. "You play?" she asked. Marek nodded. "A little." A few executives exchanged glances. Someone whispered that this would be entertaining. Clara stepped aside with a gracious gesture. "Please," she said, her tone light but edged with curiosity. Marek approached the piano as if it might disappear. The surface reflected his worn black shoes, his simple uniform. He could feel the weight of 100 eyes measuring him, dismissing him. He sat down. For a moment he didn't move. His fingers hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. The atrium felt too bright, too exposed. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud and uneven. Then he closed his eyes. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in C-sharp minor floated into the air, soft as breath. The room shifted. Conversations died mid-sentence. Laughter dissolved. The notes unfolded gently, each one deliberate, fragile, yet certain. They rose and fell like a confession. Marek's fingers found their memory. Years collapsed into seconds. The piano beneath his hands felt familiar, forgiving. Emotion surged through him, not as fear but as longing. He played not for Clara, not for the executives, not for the joke. He played for his mother, who used to sit beside him and whisper that music was honesty. He played for the young man he had been, full of dreams and arrogance. He played for the years he had hidden himself behind a mop and a quiet nod. The melody deepened, swelling with restrained pain. It was not flawless in the technical sense. It was something more dangerous. It was human. Clara felt her throat tighten. She had heard Chopin before in concert halls across Europe, performed by musicians with international acclaim. But this was different. There was no performance in it. No need to impress. It was as if the music was being pulled directly from somewhere raw and unguarded. She found herself stepping closer. When the final note faded, it did not feel like an ending. It felt like the last word of a story no one had known they needed. Silence held the room hostage. Then someone exhaled shakily. Applause began, hesitant at first, then building. Not polite applause, real applause. The kind that rises from the chest. Marek opened his eyes slowly. For a second he looked almost startled, as if he had forgotten where he was. Clara approached him. Her eyes were bright, but not with humor now. "Where did you learn to play like that?" she asked softly. "In Poland," he replied. His voice was steady. "A long time ago. Why are you working here as a janitor?" A faint smile touched his lips. "Because life doesn't always follow the sheet music." A quiet ripple of understanding moved through those close enough to hear. Clara studied him, really studied him for the first time. She saw the strength in his posture, the dignity in the way he sat. She saw not a uniform, but a man who had carried something beautiful inside him without demanding recognition. "You weren't joking," she said quietly. "You can play Chopin?" Marek stood, nodding slightly. "Yes." The room waited, breath suspended, remembering her earlier words. "If anyone here can play Chopin beautifully, I might just marry them." Clara gave a small, almost embarrassed laugh. "It seems I owe you a response." A few nervous chuckles sounded from the crowd. She looked around at her executives, her polished world of ambition and image. Then she looked back at Marek. "I won't ask you to marry me," she said, "but I would like to ask you something else." He raised an eyebrow. "Would you allow us to know you? Not as the janitor, as the musician." The question hung between them, heavier than the joke had ever been. Marek hesitated. For years he had chosen invisibility. It was safer there. No expectations. No risk of failing again, but he remembered the feeling of the keys beneath his fingers. The silence before the applause. The truth in the music. "I would," he said finally. Clara nodded, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Then perhaps," she said, turning to the room, "true talent has been cleaning our floors while we were too busy polishing our own reflections." No one laughed this time. That evening did not end with a proposal. It ended with conversations that felt different. Executives approached Marek not with mockery but with questions. Real ones about Warsaw, about music, about what it means to start over. Weeks later, the company announced a cultural initiative supporting local artists and employees with hidden talents. The atrium piano remained, no longer a decoration but an invitation. And sometimes, long after most had gone home, soft notes of Chopin drifted through the building. Not to impress, not to prove anything, just to remind everyone who heard them that dignity does not come from a title, and brilliance does not depend on a suit. On a quiet evening, Clara paused outside the atrium as Marek played. She did not interrupt. She simply listened. For the first time in years, she felt something loosen inside her carefully constructed world, and she understood that class is not declared in bold statements or expensive rooms. It reveals itself in courage and humility, in the quiet decision to let your true self be heard. The janitor had not asked for applause, but in playing he had reclaimed his name.